Hi, I'm a lazy quilter, and this is video number 2 for basic quilting. So congratulations, you made it to video number 2. You didn't burn your fabric too crisp with the iron, so now we're ready to cut it. Or maybe you did, and we're just not going to talk about it. So today we're going to cut, and cutting is really kind of the scary part of quilting. We're not used to it. We've never cut with a ruler and a rotary probably, and it has to be pretty accurate in order to come out somewhat good. I'm pretty lax about a lot of things in quilting, but cutting needs to be accurate. And the more we practice, the better it's going to get. So you're going to need a few tools today. A rotary cutter. I have a 45mm one. They come bigger, they come smaller. It's really your choice. 45 is pretty the standard though. You're also going to need a ruler, which when you start quilting, rulers can be the big purchases. So I would recommend buying this size. It's a 6.5 by 24.5. It covers most of what I want to do. I do myself have an 8.5, and then I also have 3.5, but I'm also a little crazy about quilting, so I have a lot of supplies. But this is the one that you're going to want to buy for your first one. It's wide enough to cut borders, it's long enough to cut strips, and that's really, really important. You can be tempted to buy these shorter ones that are only 12.5. They are cheaper, but when you cut strips, you're going to run into, I have to refold my fabric, and then it's going to slide, and then you have all kinds of problems. So buy one that's 24.5 inches. The last thing that you're going to need is a cutting mat to use with your rotary blade so you don't cut your table and dull your rotary cutter. I recommend buying a pretty good size in this one too, because quilters just cut big pieces. That's what we do. So you want one that is at least 36 inches wide and at least, or 36 inches long and at least 24 inches wide. That's going to let you cut strips as well. So let's go over to the cutting board and we'll get started cutting some strips. All right, let's do some cutting. We're going to get my first strip, and I'm actually cutting strips that are 4.5 inches. Okay. So after you press your bulk of your fabric, we're going to bring it over to this cutting mat, and we're going to start by squaring up our fabric, which means we want to make this line straight. Now, since we're cutting strips, we're going to use our fold, remember, to guide us in how we're going to cut, okay? So I'm going to take my ruler. This is actually my 8.5 inch. 6.5 will work for this too. And I'm going to take, hopefully you can see this line, and I'm going to line it up with this fold. I'm going to count this fold as my straight. I'm going to say this fold is straight, okay? I'm going to line up my line, and I'm going to make it so I just get a little bit of overhang all the way up the fabric, okay? All of this fabric is laying out here. I'm going to take my rotary cutter. This is the quick draw I was telling you about, just to give you the other option. So when I squeeze, the rotary blade is exposed. And when I let go, it's not. So it's a little bit safer than the other one. And we're going to cut. The key to cutting with a rotary cutter is pressure. And most of the rotary cutters have this little ridge right here. This is for fingers, okay? So I want you to put your finger on it. You don't have to angle down like this. You also don't want to be too straight in your wrist like so. You want to be at about, I don't know, less than 45-degree angle. And you want to be putting light pressure in this finger, okay? So when we cut, because it's so sharp, we just put a little bit of pressure and roll it, okay? That's how rotary cutters work. We don't have to put a lot of pressure on them. So I'm going to take my blade and I'm going to put it up against my ruler. Put my finger here and apply pressure. Now, with your other hand, you can hold the ruler two different ways. Spider fingers or palm down. Whichever is more comfortable for you. Test out both. So we're going to start. I'm going to cut up to my hand. Then I'm going to lock my hand, and cut all the way to the end. Looks like I have a nick in my blade. Awesome. There we go. All right, now I have a nice straight edge. I'm going to flip over and use that straight edge to cut my first strip. No matter what strip you're cutting, 3-inch, 2-inch, 1-inch, this is what you do. Today, I'm cutting 4-inch strips. So I'm going to next put this line, which is at the 4, on my straight line I just cut. Okay? And I'm also going to line up here. Lining up in 2 spots. The rule with cutting is the amount of fabric you're cutting is always under the ruler. This is the part we want to put the pressure on and control. If you're cutting 4 inches, the 4 inches should be under the ruler and the rest of the fabric should be outside. If you're cutting 3 inches, the 3 inches should be on the ruler and the rest should be cut outside. Don't use your cutting mat to make your measurement when you're cutting specific sizes. Rookie mistake. Use this ruler and only this ruler, okay? So by putting the 4 inches under our ruler, we know that's what we're cutting because we've got a nice line. So again, I'm gonna walk, and I'm actually, since I've got a nick in my blade, a little trick. The reason we're putting pressure is this ruler will slide. Okay? And as beginners, you're going to deal with that. So the way you get it to stop sliding is, of course, your hand, which we already talked about, but don't push over or angle in like this with your rotary cutter. 1, it won't cut, and 2, you're going to be putting so much pressure on that ruler, it's going to slide. Now, most of the time you'll take these strips and cut them into smaller squares. I'm going to do that right now. I'm cutting 4-inch squares out of my strip. And what I like to do is I like to cut 4 layers at a time. This will save you some time. And I'll fold it over. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to cut the selvage off. We don't want that to show. I'm going to cut 4-inch squares out of this. Now, all these sides are straight, so I can line them up in my 4-inch block here and cut. If you really hate cutting, invest in a die cutter. And then I'm going to do my last 4 inches. And there. So that's cutting basic strips and basic squares. Next, we're going to talk about our 1/4 inch seam.